Nestled in between big reveals from Friday's live stream on the community page, Games Workshop confirmed in their Sunday preview article that Space Wolves Wolf Scouts will now be coming to pre-order in their own box set. With this in mind, having taken the unit for a spin on more than a few occasions now, I thought it would be a good opportunity to take another look at Wolf Scouts to help you make an informed decision as to whether they're worth adding to your collection. Welcome to my mini Grimdark. Let's start with the datasheet and wargear choices, then we'll take a look at abilities and the unit composition, followed by an in-depth comparison to other units the Wolf Scouts are vying with in Space Wolves lists. 2 profiles on the datasheet, each unit consists of 5 scouts and a wolf, or 10 scouts and 2 wolves. As such, you've got a profile for the wolves along with the scouts. The wolves are situationally useful, stringing the unit out to getting charges in, and their big bases work relatively well for some move blocking around cramped terrain layouts, but mostly they're a hanger-on from the kill team aesthetic. It's a shame they don't give the unit a special ability in some form, a reactive rule for representing their ability to sniff out danger perhaps, but it's fine. Both profiles are what you'd expect, a Phobos Marine with some extra movement and a wolf. Note, if you're used to using Space Marine Scouts, Wolf Scouts have a little more durability with a 3+ save. The wolf will get OC if your unit happens to be within 6 inches of Space Wolf's non-wolf and character model. Not a big deal, but it could make a difference very occasionally. Their wargear and abilities is what makes Wolf Scouts more interesting. Wargear-wise, by default, the Scouts all come with plasma pistols as a ranged weapon. It looks good on paper, and I found that where you can give them some additional ranged buffing to increase the odds of hitting, in particular, in Saga of the Great Wolf, just for example, bringing all of those plasma weapons to bear with -3 AP and damage 2 on overcharge can wipe out small elite units, fast attack units, even some tough infantry units with lower model counts. There's obviously a hazardous risk, but the plasma weapons in this unit makes them exceptional as a scalpel for your force. Infiltrate in aggressively, and if you get first turn, you can scout move 7 inches to punish one of your opposition units on turn 1. One model can take a plasma gun instead of the pistol. It gives them 24-inch range on the same profile, which is fair, but not necessarily auto-take. Plasma pistols are one of the few pistols worth remembering that you can shoot whilst in engagement range, and you'll lose that with the gun. So it's a trade-off. Dealer's choice. One other model in the unit can be your House Rune Priest. You'll trade the plasma pistol for a bolt pistol, ranged thunderclap attack, and a runic stave in melee. The bolt pistol is an obvious downgrade from the plasma pistol, but the thunderclap gives you something different to the plasma pistol, rather than better or worse. It's only 12-inch range, but with D3 attacks and blast, it gives the unit something for taking down light to medium infantry in numbers, where all of your other models can only destroy 1 each at range at best. Finally, the shame of the kit, really, the Instigator Bolt Carbine. You can only take 1 in a unit of 12 models, which seems unnecessarily strict since it's okay, but not near enough to motivate me to take a bigger unit just for this weapon. AP -2 and damage 2 is solid, as is 24-inch range. Bonus when you're in the rare situation that precision is going to matter. I am likely going to pick up 2 kits of Wolf Scouts, but I'm still likely to skip this wargear choice so that I can play the unit as 2 units of 6 or 1 unit of 12. I'll say now, I like them as a unit of 12, but they're far more useful to your army as 2 units of 6 more often than not. It's just then a pity for anybody building this as a kill team kit that they're going to have to proxy their model in or won't be able to take this wargear choice. In melee, everybody comes with a combat blade, that's 4 attacks, -1 AP, and just damage 1. The profile again is good enough. With buffing, though, it can go to very good. Pretty typical of Space Wolves units in general, I suppose. With the attacks volume you can put out, you'll find lethal hits and sustain hits can make a big difference to this unit's output, and you've got a good chance of activating these abilities across all of the attacks the unit will put out. The stave is the unit's bigger hitter in melee, and this makes the Rune Priest worthwhile in my mind. Strength 6 and D3 damage, still just -1 AP. Your pack leader defaults to having a power weapon and a plasma pistol, with the power weapon being out-and-out upgrade for the knife with strength 5 and AP -2. The last wargear choice is a haywire mine. You can take 1 per unit for a once per game use. It does some mortal damage to enemies within 3 inches if the enemy happens to be a vehicle. This is 2d3 worth of damage, so that's pretty good, and to be fair, it does give the unit the potential to wipe a vehicle out in a single round of fighting, with this combined with melee in the likes of Saga the Beastslayer, for instance. Abilities-wise, Wolf Scouts are strong, again with a damage-dealing first mentality over utility. They do have both Infiltrators and Scout 7, which is just a brilliant combo. You can infiltrate aggressively when deploying, and then, after the roll-off for first turn, you can either use the 7 inches to dive back into cover if the opponent is going first and you're worried that you're going to get torn up. Or you can move up further to be able to bring those plasma weapons to bear on turn 1 if you're going first. I took out a small unit of Valorous Custodians that had been carelessly deployed with this little move in the first round of a recent matchup. 110 points of golden bananas reduced to plasma mulch in the blink of an eye. Thing of beauty, that is. Wolf Scouts' unit-specific ability grants them +1 to wound when they're attacking units that are more than 6 inches away from other enemy units. It's a nice rule. It feels very natural given the unit's hunting lore and works well on the tabletop. You can start to see how their wargear and abilities make this unit a really effective first-turn threat to select enemy units. Careful infiltration of the battlefield and a scout move to bring those plasma weapons to aim on the enemy elite unit, light walker or tank maybe, a lone character that you can get the jump on. You can do a lot of damage really early. Combine this with a charge and some buffing to enhance their melee, and you've got a unit that can delete something important from your enemy's army before it can do anything meaningful. So, thinking about these wargear choices and the kit that's going to be up for pre-order, what do we do? I've proxied the unit into a bunch of games now, and I've decided I like running 1 or 2 units of Wolf Scouts. Depending on the rest of my list, I'm going to be running them as units of 6 models going forward, but I do want the option to run them as a 12 model unit for when I'm running specific detachments, and I'm happy to make them more of a central damage dealer in my army. So I'm probably going to pick up 2 kits. I'll convert one of the pack leaders so that they're actually holding a plasma pistol rather than the power sword, so that they could run as a standard scout if I happen to run them as a unit of 12. I'm going to build 1 model as a rune priest and 1 with the plasma gun. That gives me the option of running a unit of 6 models with all of the trimmings and that have more range efficiency, and a unit of 6 all with plasma pistols. I don't mind this either, because neither the plasma gun or the rune priest are automatically better depending on the situation. I do have some spare bodies from an infiltrator kit where I only built up 5 of the models, so I might see how the spare parts that I have left over from the Wolf Scouts kit fits onto those torsos. Perhaps use a couple to make up spares from the other loadouts in case I miss them a little bit more than expected. That'll mean I don't have to buy a 3rd box just to get a full wargear selection. This could also give me the option to build up a carbine if I want to, again if I happen to run a unit of 12. I won't otherwise build a Wolf Scout with a carbine because that's making a bigger commitment to run the unit as a 12 strong, and most of the tournaments that I play in locally lean hard on what you see is what you get. One of my Wolf Scouts will be built up with the hairwire mine in their hand, and I'm probably going to build another with a mine either attached to their back or belt or on the base itself. In the odd occasion I run the unit as 12 models, the one carrying the mine will be the one equipped. Simple stuff really, but a good way to stretch 2 boxes out rather than having to buy a 3rd kit to make up the options and just to be able to have the choice of 1 big unit or 2 small ones. Regardless, my recommendation is that the Rune Priest and Plasma Gun are worthwhile. The Carbine isn't really unless you are obsessed with the idea of running a 12 model unit. Even then, it's optional. I'm sure most opponents in most environments won't mind that one of the unit has a carbine if you like the look of it or you happen to play kill team as well, of course. In terms of unit composition, 5 scouts and a wolf will set you back 105 points, 10 scouts and a pair of wolves will set you back 210 points. It's just about right, though it might feel 5 points too much, if anything. We'll come to this later on in the video. It hasn't stopped me taking the unit, though. You just need to be wary of the fact that against some opponents, this unit's low durability and short range could make them very vulnerable. World Eaters, Black Templars, Blood Angels, and Custodes, for instance, will take the squad in a turn if you deploy too aggressively and give them lines to charge you on round 1. That's 105 points down the drain in an already tough matchup. 105 points just feels a little bit too expensive for a unit to bait an exchange game, but losing them in melee might well open up a lane for a Land Raider to ferry some head takers in for revenge, or for a unit of Thunderwolf cavalry to do the same, just for example. As we'll see in a bit though, standard scouts will be the better option if that's your game plan. Model for model, they're just much cheaper. I'd be much less concerned for losing some of the poor new recruits since they're much smaller points investments. With this in mind, the 12-strong unit feels very risky, because the same logic still applies here. Even at 12 models, a large number of armies have the capability of just deleting them in a decent round of shooting or combat if you get caught out. I will say in some detachments, particularly with range support, Gladius, Great Wolf being the obvious examples, the 12-strong unit is a lot of fun early on. If you can get just 2 rounds of shooting and combat from this unit, you'll easily destroy enough of the enemy to make up the points in most matchups. But it might cost you some CP in the process. They'll combine all of that plasma fire to flatten a lot of things, though. For me, as mentioned, one unit of 6 is the sweet pot, teamed up with another infiltrating unit or my fast attack units potentially. I have enjoyed running 2 units occasion, but mostly for casual play. The lower durability will always be a risk for the investment, and this is the case for all Marines really in 10th edition. With Wolf Scouts, there isn't a one-size-fits-all plan here really. You're going to need to gauge the speed and capability of your opponent when you deploy the unit to know whether their scout moves will be enough to get them out of harm's way if you don't get first turn, while still allowing them to get into position to do some damage if you do. Against Eldari, I was much more cagey than a previous game against the Footslog and Custodes lists, for instance. If the Eldari player got first turn, they'd have had a lot of fast attack units that would absolutely get into my scouts and probably kill them off if I was to overplay my hand. So I set them up more mid-table where I knew at least one of my other units could get in on a counter-charge if my opponent decided to overextend to get the scout. Against Custodes, they deployed very aggressively since the army had only short melee ranged threat. I sat out in front of some of ruins, ready to jump back into cover if I was going second, but dive in on the Terminators if I went first. I might not get away with that with some Custodes lists, but in this case I was able to take advantage of a deployment mistake from my opponent. Because the unit is getting play, I don't envisage seeing their points decrease from Games Workshop. If they went down by 5 though, I'd say that was then bang on personally, but their cost is absolutely not enough to stop me playing them. As for the rule of cool, they're fun and the sculpts look great, so happy wolf noises can ensue here. What about the competition though? Starting with the rarely played unit of Eliminators at 85 points for 3 models. Of the infantry in this video, these are the most expensive per model. Standard Phobos Marine datasheet, so no additional durability in general aside from stealth ability from -1 to be hit from range. So they are, per model, much less expendable than other units here. They're an exclusively ranged unit really, but they do have some good tools for the job as you can see. Strength 5 -2 AP and damage 3 on bolt sniper rifles are going to be enough to pick off a Terminator in a turn, whilst the Las Fusel on the Sergeant, if you go in this direction, adds a Strength 9 -3 AP and D6 damage attack that could, theoretically, lift a Death Shroud Terminator off the board on a good day. That's nothing to scoff at, but the 3+ to hit as standard will be your curse here. The heavy trait means you get +1 to hit when standing still, but most opponents won't let you get away with that in more optimized games. I really like Eliminators in casual games. Who doesn't like the idea of a sniper tower and 3 specialists just picking off opponents from 36 inches? In reality, few Warhammer games actually allow for this. And for this unit, you're paying a premium for that precision trait that, in practice, is only rarely going to be impactful. Great unit, but a big investment for what they bring, and I'd take Wolf Scouts over them for faster moving, more adaptable damage dealing every time, to be honest, if I'm picking between the two. Incursors are generally seen as the ugly brother to Infiltrators on the competitive scene, but they do have their place in casual and regional gaming, and in fact I fell victim to a competitive list that utilized a unit of these at their core strategy, really effectively early in the edition. Profile-wise, their melee is slightly better than Infiltrators thanks to some AP and sustain hits 1. Lacking native ability buffing with fewer attacks, the sustain hits doesn't better Wolf Scouts though. The Oculus Carbines give the unit better range threat than Wolf Scouts, and ignores cover with assault means they're able to reposition fairly well to pick their targets. But 0 AP and only damage 1s means their actual damage output at range is far inferior to Wolf Scouts if Wolf Scouts can get into range. Incursors don't have Infiltrate, but they have Scouts move 6. It's really their multi-spectrum ability that gets them in the odd list, and it would complement a Space Wolves army really well. Essentially, the Incursors tag 1 unit that they've hit with a ranged attack in this round, and from there on, all Adeptus Astartes attacks are at +1 to hit against that opponent. My opponent kept tagging my elite units and then focusing them down with either Hellblasters, Fire, or Assault Intercessor Chainswords to really good effect. For Space Wolves, we have 3+ to hit almost across the board, so you'll take that to 2s in melee for any of your units, and that's a great output increase. A completely different unit to Wolf Scouts. We're talking apples and oranges here. As a result, whether one is better than the other depends on whether you want a damage dealer in Wolf Scouts or the utility that Incursors bring. Incursors generally miss out to Infiltrators in most competitive lists. In general, Infiltrators have a pretty weak profile, though the Carbines do hit on 2s if they're standing still, I suppose. The unit can infiltrate, but in competitive matchups, if your opponent takes the units, they're likely not going to be positioning them far up the board. Most likely, Infiltrators will sit near the home objective and prevent deep strikes with their Monty Scramblers. Against opponents not deep striking, they might get bold and restrict reserves further up the field. I've often utilized this strategy myself, and it's really convenient. It gives you a massive peace of mind to get your army forward, not having to worry about the backfield so much, especially since I generally have a Lancer or Dreadnought back there to help the Infiltrators out. You're unlikely to take Infiltrators for any other reason, though. If you think 9 inches is a big enough bubble, I'd argue that Wolf Scouts are a much better damage dealer than Infiltrators, so spend the extra 5 points for the unit. Obviously, though, if you just want to build around this bubble, Infiltrators are the only choice. Reivers are in a bit of a sorry place. In theory, they can almost match Wolf Scout in melee, but their bolt pistols are inferior to the plasma pistols, special issue or not. They scout, but can't infiltrate, so Wolf Scouts have bettered them here too. Reivers can deep strike with their wargear options, which can be cute, but it's not superior to just being able to infiltrate. Their abilities are theoretically excellent utility on objectives, one forcing a penalized battle shock test, and the other reducing a sea of units within 3 inches. In practice, though, more often than not, your opponent passes the battle shock, and the OC debuff bubble would be awesome if Reivers had any staying power, but they don't. In truth, in most situations, if the Reivers are within 3 inches of the opponent, they're about to die, so the debuff may only, at best, have a brief impact, making it unreliable. I've always loved the idea and the aesthetic of the Reivers, but Games Workshop have never succeeded in making them impactful enough. They're only 80 points for 5, but you'd likely be better either spending more on the Wolf Scouts or less on standard Scouts and go for something a bit different. Speaking of, my favourite utility unit for Space Marines in general, and this doesn't change when I'm playing them for Space Wolves. These new recruits are even less durable with only a 4+ save. They are the cheapest per model unit in this video with a really appealing wargear selection. They default to the light grey options and the bolt gun. You can swap this out for the shorter range shot, gaining the assault trait, which comes with a slightly better close range combat weapon. The shotgun just looks awesome on the sculpt, so this is always the right choice for me, even if it's not always the sensible one, since the unit is probably going to die in melee against most opponents. After that, 1 in 5 can take a sniper rifle. Rule of Cool makes this mandatory, and it's a genuinely okay gun for a cheap unit. One other model in 5 can take either a missile launcher or a heavy bolter. I like the missile launcher even if the heavy bolter looks cooler in my opinion with some Necromunda vibes. The flexibility of the crack or frag option, though, is what I don't like passing up, again for the cost. The missile launcher is only 4+ to hit mine, so weigh up again which you'd prefer, knowing it's only going to be very situationally impactful decision, and you'll probably always wish you tried the other one instead. Finally, the sergeant is blessed with a chainsaw that you hope you'll never have to use. You're not paying for any of this, though. The unit can do some damage on a good dice day, but you're actually paying for their 3 abilities. Firstly, the nifty combination of Scout 6 inches and Infiltrate. Then, Guerrilla Tactics, to allow the unit to be picked up and placed in reserves at the end of your opponent's turn, ready to come down again in yours. And you're only paying 70 points for a utility unit that will, occasionally, win you the game. I really enjoy this unit, and I'd say you shouldn't be thinking about if you take these or the Wolf Scouts. Again, different units that share a name and a couple of great core abilities. Ultimately, though, if you want utility, you take the Scout squad. Go wild on the wargear you like the look of. It won't matter because it's a combination of these 3 abilities that you want. You can move block your opponent in turn 1, then pick them up whilst your Thunderwolf cavalry engage and your Terminators drop into the midboard. Then you can bring your scouts down onto the battlefield to skulk on an objective somewhere or get behind enemy lines for secondaries. This is a great, dedicated point-scoring unit, and genuinely a lot of fun to play in all formats. Wolf Scouts can't give you this kind of utility. When it comes to damage dealing, don't be fooled by the sniper rifles and rocket launchers. This unit won't survive conflict for very long at all. That's where you want your Wolf Scouts. Finally, the most expensive per model unit, technically, is the Invictor Warsuit. It's 125 points, so more expensive than a unit of Wolf Scouts. But you do get a scouting unit that is relatively durable and can actually put out good damage in both range and melee, even if it's not Redemptor standards. The 2 highlighted are your choose-betweens, of which there's no real correct choice. I tend to go with the twin Iron Hail autocannon as it complements the Vanguard support ability better and it gives you something you might distract your opponent, an opposition vehicle or walker, though outside of melee you don't have any dedicated anti-tank here. The Invictor Fist is good enough, but you're not looking at one-shotting anything that isn't already banged up really either. The 8-inch scout move and the Vanguard ability are what makes this unit work, but you'll have to set it up. Vanguard means that if one of your units is attacked at range by an enemy unit, and your unit is within 6 inches of the Invictor Warsuit, once the enemy unit has finished their shooting, you can shoot them back with the Warsuit as long as they're an eligible target. When this happens, it's a solid ability. It's not hellbrute good, but solid nonetheless. You've got a lot of attacks that you can put your opponent's way and make them regret their target choices. I haven't run one for a while, but when I've played against them, I think they've been best used to guard units on objectives. And that can make you think twice. The thing is, since my armies go heavy on melee damage dealing rather than range, they've never really posed much issue for me. And a couple of well-placed anti-tank shots from a Lancer, Ballistus or similar will take apart the Warsuit, trying to act as a sentry in this way. So the ability is limited in optimized play, but it's really fun in casual settings. Strictly speaking, the Invictor Warsuit is superior to the Wolf Scouts in damage dealing, but that's what you're paying extra for, I suppose. For damage dealing, though, I'd still take the Wolf Scouts, as with a bit of buffing, those plasma weapons are enough for this kind of unit, and being able to infiltrate means they have a better chance of being in the right place, rather than getting destroyed before they can be impactful, which is your real risk for a bigger target that is the Warsuit. Hopefully, to help your decision making, here's the Wolf Scouts in 3 tables against the other units that I believe you would typically be using as obvious alternatives in Space Wolves lists. When it comes to purely utility, the Humble Scouts are king for me. Even without considering their cost, guerrilla tactics with Scouts and Infiltrates core abilities makes them pricelessly useful in all forms of play. Both Infiltrators and Incursors then get the nods in second and third as they have genuinely useful utility abilities, either through screening areas of the table or providing buffs to your other units. Wolf Scouts' combination of Infiltrators and Scouts makes them very useful for board control, and this elevates them above the other units, including the sadly unreliable Reivers. When it comes to damage dealing, the tactical Warsuit brings bigger guns and a big fist, along with higher durability for a scouting unit. It can also steadfast other units with the threat of a counterattack. After that, Wolf Scouts beat out their closest competition in Eliminators as a typical unit size, because they just have the potential to do more damage in a single round of shooting, albeit at short range. And when we factor in melee into the mix, it becomes a no-brainer, even before detachment buffing. As for points, since the infantry here have more or less like-for-like durability and profiles, per model seems most appropriate. I did make the decision to treat the Wolf Scouts as a 5-model unit since, for intents and purpose, the Wolf is a bit of a bonus model, and certainly not equal value to the Scouts. If I hadn't done this, the models would appear to be priced at 17.5 points each, and that wouldn't be representative at all. So the Scouts are the cheapest option. You'll see from looking at them across these tables why I consider them to be a bargain choice. This is one of the reasons they make it into so many competitive lists. It makes sense that Incursors and Reivers are the next cheapest, but for me, whilst it makes Incursors playable, Reivers still need a rules change for 11th edition before they'll see the table. After that, Infiltrators and Wolf Scouts, and we're creeping into the point where the unit does need to do something to justify their value, and we can't really consider them to be an expendable unit. Eliminators and Warsuits are a big investment per model, and I think this is what often keeps them out of lists. This isn't science, this is my experience of both playing and playing against these units, as well as seeing them played in competitive events. And as you can see, as is almost always the case with unit selection, even though much of the internet would have you believe otherwise, successful players understand that it isn't usually about which unit is better than another, or whether a unit is worth the points. It's about which units are better at what they do, and whether this is worth the investments of points for you and your army. In this category of scouting and infiltrating units, Games Workshop have clearly attempted to give each unit a unique stamp. That gives you choice to decide which complements your army best. With that in mind, here's a couple of examples of this in action. A 5-0-0 list and a 4-1-0 list in their tournaments. In the first, we can see a combination of Scouts and Wolf Scouts. This is how I like to play, though I'd usually just take one of each. Both units will be doing different roles on the table. Scouts are more expendable if needed, but their guerrilla tactics will mean that they'll be popping up doing secondaries all over the place after initially creating small footholds for the Thunderwolf cavalry to move into. The Wolf Scouts will pick an area of the table and make it their mission to do as much damage as possible before they die, and if they live long enough, they'll reinforce the fast attack units. No Wolf Scouts in the second Space Wolves list, but I wanted to show you it's an example of different kinds of infiltrating and scouting units being taken for different strategic purposes. Incursors to buff other units with +1 to hit, Infiltrators to hold down the home objective and keep it safe with their bubble, and Scouts for cheap secondary scoring, with their up and down again ability. Incidentally, a wild and wonderful Gladius list, this one generally. Love the variation. Are Wolf Scouts worth buying now that the single kit is coming up for pre-orders and you don't have to get them alongside those Tau crazies? Fair warning, my response here has no consideration for the fact that this is going to be one of the mid-level expensive kill team kits, which ultimately means it's going to be one of the more pricey Space Wolves kits for the plastic that you're actually going to be able to use. That said, the sculpts are beautiful, very wolfy, and perfect renditions of the lore in my opinion. They look like lone wolf and a mixed ragtag group of veterans, not the new recruits of the standard scouts, and that's how they should be. Rules-wise, decide if you want a damage-dealing infiltrating unit. If you want a utility unit, standard scouts are better. If you want a unit that can support your scoring, but primarily work on territory and dealing damage, albeit for only a short time against most opponents given their lack of durability, you'll enjoy Wolf Scouts. Are they worth the points? Just about. They are arguably 5, maybe 10, too much from a very early exposure, but it won't stop me taking them, and 7 times out of 10, they do enough to justify themselves. Let's face it, most Space Wolves units will fall foul of getting killed off before they contribute at some stage due to the low durability that they have, but their positioning on the table will often mean Wolf Scouts are more susceptible to this again. Great unit though, well realised in my opinion. So, with the Wolf Scouts going up to pre-order this weekend, will you be picking one up? More? How are you playing Infiltrators and Scouts? Where do your opinions differ to mine, and which do you think I've gotten right from your experience? Thanks for watching. Keep hobbying.